Welcome. We are here protesting the American Psychiatric Association's annual meeting, which is happening behind closed doors right now at the Javits Center in New York City. We are bringing to you the voice of the alternative mental health movement to the public, the way it should be. I'm joined today by my guest, Jill Kesti, who is a graphic designer and leader of the Facebook group Coalition to End Forced Psychiatric Drugging. They believe that states should impose an absolute ban on all forced and non-consensual medical interventions against persons with disabilities, including the non-consensual administration of psychosurgery, electroshock, and mind-altering drugs for both long and short-term application. They say that the obligation to end forced psychiatry interventions based on grounds of disability is of immediate application. So thank you for joining me today, Jill.
Thank you for having me.
So the first question I like to ask everybody is to figure out, what their motivation is, what their why is. Why did they get involved in this type of work? Can you tell me a little bit about what inspired you to do this kind of work?
I started the coalition page about a year ago due to being forcibly drugged by the state of Michigan, and I was put on an ATO, or called an alternative treatment order, which was a court-ordered document that forced me to have injections monthly of the drug called Abilify. So I had to report monthly at my local CMH, and they injected me, and it was against my will. I did not want the medications. I had been healing myself holistically for over 3 years, using nutrition, meditation, and rest, and EMDR, among other things. And I decided, after I was forced injected and also forced hospitalized against my will, that I needed to do something about this. I could not believe that my human rights were so violated, and I was very concerned that in this day and age of free America, that many people are being coerced into believing, for number one, that there is such thing as mental illness on the scale they are put in the DSM, with as many disorders as there are out there today. And also that these psychotropic drugs are really harming people long term. When I found out that I could die 25 years before my time due to complications, side effects, and the drugs themselves, I said, this can't continue. I cannot continue to take these medications, which I like to call, as I believe it's Dr. Whitaker, Dr. Bregan, speaks of these medications as neurotoxins. And that's the word I've chosen to use to explain better that these drugs are harmful. And nobody should be forced to take them. It's a violation directly against our human rights. In the United Nations, the Convention for the Rights of People with Disabilities has decided that this is torture, that forced coercive psychiatry is torture to people who are the victims, and they have declared it to be torture. And unfortunately, the United States has not ratified the convention by the United Nations. So we're stuck where we are right now with these laws that allow people like me to be forcibly drugged.
Is this something that's still continuing to this day, or are you still under one of these ATO orders?
My ATO ended in February thanks to the help of a PsyD, which is a doctor of psychology. His name was Toby Watson, and he is also an advocate against forced treatment. He testified for me. I had to go to Wisconsin, where he is, and I'm located in Upper Michigan. I had to drive 5 hours to his office, and then I did an at-length interview. Then he got all of my hospital records, which I have a 20-year history of being labeled mentally ill. He reviewed all of them, and what his report said to the court was, ATOs do not work. They tend to not work. And also, he revised my label. Currently, I'm going by his label, which is that I have chronic post-traumatic stress syndrome and substance-induced bipolar or substance-induced psychotic disorder. which is a lot different from the original label I was given 20 years ago, which was bipolar. I've read a lot about these diagnoses, and I've come to the conclusion that I am a human being. I am not my diagnosis, and I don't tend to believe in these diagnoses. They were invented so that the insurance companies could have a billable label so that they could get paid for their services. The state could get paid, or psychiatrists could get paid, or psychologists. Anybody who diagnoses somebody needs to have a label so that they can get paid. And when I look at my history, I realize that's pretty much what's happened to me. And I no longer buy into a label such as a mentally ill diagnosis.
Now, as I understand it, this you called it ATO. I've heard it called AOT in other states, so assisted outpatient treatment. The idea that not only can they force drugs upon you while you're in a hospital, but they can actually force drugs on you while you're outside of a hospital is something that I didn't even realize existed until a few years ago. And I feel like most people are completely unaware that this goes on. Did you know that this existed? Can you tell us a little bit about the process of what finding out that, oh, by the way, after you leave the hospital, we're going to keep drugging you then too? Can you talk a little bit
I
about
was
what that's like?
completely and utterly shocked. I could not believe that this could happen in this day and age, and it continues to happen to this day. I was in a psychotic episode, and I was brought to the hospital, and then I was released after 3 days. So this was the first episode, and 2 episodes happened to me within a month. After my release from the hospital the first time, I didn't have a hearing because I took the medications willingly. They let me go within 3 days because I had gotten sleep in the hospital. Everything was fine. So, but then I was released, and due to ignorance by my general practitioner, she gave me some pain at my follow-up for psychosis. She gave me baclofen and prednisone, 2 drugs to help with sciatic pain that was worsened by the ER when they threw me into the cops. And, you know, the first episode when I was transported to the hospital was horrific. And it included a forced catheterization, and it totally, completely traumatized me. It was like rape. So after that when a general practitioner gave me the baclofen and prednisone, both drugs can cause psychosis. She did not know this. She gave it to me, so I spiraled into a further psychosis. This psychosis was beyond anything. I was screaming. It went on for weeks, 3 weeks of no sleep. And my boyfriend at the time had no idea about this disorder, this mood disorder, I call it, an imbalance, trauma-based imbalance. And he called the police. The police came, they walked into my home without me letting them in. They came into my home. They basically removed me forcibly from my house, brought me to the local jail, and then brought me to the hospital, and then brought me 5 hours away to a psych ward. And when I was in the psych ward, I refused medication because after my release from the first day, I stopped taking medication. I said, I'm not going to take medication. I'm healing holistically. I want to clean my body out. I want to still have a child. I'm 42 years old and I just met somebody. I don't want these medications in my body. They can mess up the fetus. So while I'm in the hospital, I'm refusing the medication the second time. Not a good idea. They ended up putting me into a court hearing, and I did have representation, but it was not a lawyer who was worth any salt. And I got my say, but the psychiatrist of the hospital was taken. Their words were taken over mine, and I was not to be released from the hospital unless I agreed to the administration of the ATO. And in order to get out of the hospital, I had to agree to it. I didn't agree, but that's where the court ordered, and I pretty much had to follow suit in order to not be put back in the hospital. And then it was 6 months of that, where monthly they gave me the medications. I did not want them, but I had to go and appear. If I did not appear, they would have hospitalized me again, I was told. So I made sure I went, and now I'm in the process of tapering off that medication down to 0, and I'm going to try to be medication free again, which is what my wishes were a year and a half ago. But unfortunately, now time has run out for having children, pretty much. Now I have to taper off this drug. And I'm still amazed that it can happen that way. When there are other treatments, that's the key point. I have been treating myself holistically using many different methods for 3 years. And to have the state come in and say, no, we want you to take this method and use it as your own. That is wrong. It should be choice. It should be my choice.
Now, what grounds do they have? I know that different states have different policies. Some have like a competency-based policy that says that if they deem you incompetent, then they can force anything on you against your will. Some of them have a safety-based policy that says, oh, if we deem that you're a risk to yourself or to others, which doesn't necessarily mean violence. That can also mean just not taking care of yourself. It's kind of ridiculous. What goes on in, you said Michigan is where you're from. How do they actually use the law to do this to you legally?
They claimed that I called suicide, or I was threatening to kill myself. And my boyfriend was concerned that I was going to kill myself. And there are 3 statutes in Michigan, whether you're harm to yourself, to others, or are gravely disabled. And I'm sure they looked at my history as well. And since currently I'm on SSD, I applied for SSD when I lost my job 4 years ago, and I was granted it due to the history of I've had about 12 hospitalizations in the last 20 years. So they looked at my history and they granted me SSD. So when I was brought to the hospital, they assessed that I was suicidal and that I was gravely disabled. So therefore and then there's also that tricky thing where they say if you do not have an insight to your disorder or your disease, then you can be, if you lack insight, even though, and the funny thing is I've done so much work on all this that I have so much insight into my disorder that I know that there are natural ways to cure and to manage my imbalance. And that's what the funny thing is they say that lack of insight leads to, that enables the psychiatrist also to drug you against your will. Your lack of insight shows that your disorder is overcoming you. And I think that's just absolutely ridiculous. It's one of those catch-22s. Yeah, I have lack of insight, but I don't. So, but yeah, I was gravely disabled and suicidal. And granted, I was speaking about suicide. I was saying, please do not drug me. Please do not put me back in the hospital because they are going to torture me. I would rather kill myself than go back to the hospital. And that's a refrain I've heard many times from people that I've worked with on my page already, is so many people have been harmed by this system that exists that they would rather die. They would rather commit suicide than be returned to the hands of people who are going to hurt them. That's my experience in the hospital, that there are caring people there, but it is a harmful system. I was pretty much tortured, held down by 9 staff and injected daily, and until I started to comply, which, there is that problem. The problem that exists in society is there's nowhere else to go at this time. For people who, my boyfriend, my family, they see me in this condition, what choice do they have? We need more choices. We need more options. We need more alternatives that are non-medicative based. They're doing open dialogue in Finland and having amazing results with non-medicating ways of treating people in first psychosis and in continual psychosis, helping people to manage. I truly believe that's one of the big problems in society today, is our inability to communicate with each other. I can't talk to my family. They don't talk back. We don't resolve the family issues that we all were a part of growing up. We don't know how to speak together as a family unit. We weren't taught that. It wasn't part of our family structure. And open dialogue allows that to happen, to which is one of the main things I think causes mental imbalance, is people being unable to communicate and unable to express their trauma safely. When it comes up, it comes up, and obviously it can be very dangerous and very scary, and unfortunately we need more options.
All right, let me ask this. You mentioned that you feel like you have insight when you're going through these psychosis. Can you tell me a little bit about what brings on the psychosis, and then what's kind of going through your mind, and what that experience is like for you from your perspective?
I feel that it's repressed trauma. That I had a lot of things happen to me when I was younger. I was raised in a very strict religion, sort of like the Amish with cars, you could say. We didn't have television, or we weren't supposed to. We weren't allowed to listen to music. We weren't allowed to wear makeup. The stricter part of our religion didn't cut their hair. So my great-grandfather started this branch up here in the Upper Peninsula of Michigan, and I have like 780 first and second cousins, or from my great-grandparents. That's the lineage. There's like 800 of us, and there's a lot of people in the family, but it's a closed society, and very, very, very strict. So I feel that a lot of my trauma happened when my parents divorced, which was against the religion, and we were excommunicated. In a sense, we left the church, and at age 12, I was brought into mainstream society, and there I discovered alcohol and started drinking after having such a very strict background, coming into the world of anything goes. And I experimented for the next 10, 15 years. I ended up going to U of M, and I experimented with mushrooms and marijuana and alcohol. Of course, that was from when I was a child, when I left the church. So I believe that over time, when things happened to me, I didn't process them. I didn't know how to process feelings and emotions. I didn't know how to process trauma. And things would happen, and I would suppress them using alcohol and other substances. And I did that for years and years. And then I lived a toxic lifestyle in my later years until I cleaned up everything 4 years ago. I was 250 pounds, and I was eating massive fast food. I was taking large quantities of caffeine into my system. I quit the alcohol many years ago after I realized, after I was diagnosed with a disorder. I said, I have to quit alcohol and mushrooms and all that experimentation. But I believe that that I ended up repressing all my emotions. And when a trigger happens, something emotional happens, something traumatic happens, it brings up things that have not been processed. And I flash back to earlier times during psychosis. It's almost like I'm a child again, and I'm viewing the world as like a 3-year-old. So everybody around me is scary and big and loud, and you can hear everything. It's almost like I can hear the water dropping in my neighbor's house and their faucet. Everything is peaked. It is a little bit like doing mushrooms or hallucinogens, except that it's very, very, very terrifying. I do believe it's repressed trauma, and I do believe that it bursts out at inopportune times and creates a psychosis, which is brought on and worsened by lack of sleep. If you don't get rest and you don't get sleep, you're going to, in a way, I don't know if it's true that there's such a thing as REM, sleep disorder, but there is an REM disorder where you actually start to dream while you're awake. And that's the best description I can come up with for psychosis. It is dreaming, it is being in a nightmare while awake.
Well, some of these things kind of feel like I'm listening to my own story in some ways. And even these things about having a dream while you're awake. One of the ideas that has been talked about a lot is the idea that, you have these neurochemicals that build up in your brain during the day that are released when you sleep. But then if you don't go to sleep and you have this buildup of these molecules in your brain, they need to go somewhere. And so then it's possible they start seeping out into your brain during the daytime. And so like this idea that you're dreaming during, the day is pretty plausible.
Yeah, it feels like that. It does.
Now, do you find for you that you mentioned that these things pop up at inopportune times, and then you also mentioned sleep? Do you find that, so when the things are going stressful in life, then you're not getting good sleep, and then because you're not getting good sleep, then these problems start to rise, which then makes it harder to sleep? And is that like a common pattern?
Yes, it's a cycle. And if you don't catch it at the beginning, it will spiral. I know that if I spend one night awake, I'm already in the danger zone. I need to go back. I need to rest. And a lot of people, like, there were weeks when I was going through withdrawals because there was a time when I was coming off of the medications 4 years ago, and I was going through withdrawals and I could not sleep for weeks, it felt like. So the advice somebody gave me was just when I began meditation and learned how to meditate and quiet my mind and at least lay down as if I were going to sleep. And that would calm everything and go into a meditative state. And I wouldn't go and experience the cycle exploding. And I've had it happen to me. I was hospitalized 12 times, but in 20 years, it's happened probably about 17 or 18 times. So it's pretty common. And it is kind of hard to think about going off medication for some people. And for me, it's a no-brainer that I know that I can do this because I've gone 6 years without medication in the past 2 decades. And I know that I can manage it with sleep, through talking, through my page and creation of some sort. When I first, like I was saying, through withdrawal, I was drawing crazily. I was just drawing for months at a time just to get that extra energy out. Some people, it might work out for working out or exercise. I'm not an exerciser. I'm an artistic type of person, so I need to get that energy out in a different way. But I believe that's key, is keeping your sleep in check at all times. And nutrition. I discovered nutrition, and I looked into Abraham Hoffer, who supposedly cured several schizophrenics and his own, I believe, through nutrition and supplementation. And I ended up seeing my chiropractor, and I take $140 worth of supplements every month to help to maintain and manage nutrition-wise, sleep-wise, and meditation-wise. All these natural ways should be taught in school. I don't know. It's just, it's incredible the amount of, well, to me, it seems to be, I was in marketing and advertising for 15 years. And I believe we've been truly sold to this lie from pharmaceutical companies that their answer is the answer. And so many people believe it. My family believes it. My boyfriend even kind of goes back and forth thinking, do you need these drugs? These drugs should be the answer. And I'm like, no, don't you understand? 25 years is 25 years. I mean, I'm not sure how old you are, but I'm 43. And by the time I'm 50, that's it. 7 more years or 10 more years, or, it's not worth the trade-off for the side effects. I mean, there's not even any good thing I can say about any of the medications I've been on, except that I've had massive amounts of side effects. And that is the cry that I hear from everyone. Everyone is saying we are dying from these side effects. These drugs are not worth the trouble. They are causing more harm than help. And I can see in an emergency situation, if the drugs have to be given, there's nothing I can do about that. Legally, they're doing it. And if it's done to me again, I can only protest. But the long-term issue is really where the science is showing that people are dying at an incredibly faster rate. and with horrible diseases with tardive dyskinesia and akathisia. And my nephew's mother died at 32. She was 32 years old from complications from psych drugs and street drug use. There are so many people in this small area of, I grew up in the UP up here, and I was gone for 20 years. And when I came back, I was shocked. Everybody's like, yep, Ontonoggin's a pill town. Calumet's a pill town. We got meth heads over here. And I was like, what has happened to this little innocent area? Everybody's on pills, and everybody's just handing the pills to everybody else. And I'm just like, it's like a big psychiatrist's office everywhere I go. I'm like, and of course I don't speak about that to people because they're doing things illegally, but pills have taken over, and they're not healthy, in my opinion, from having been forced to take them. There are many healthier ways to get through life, and people have to realize that they're killing themselves, especially if they're doing it under the counter. And that's one of the what I see as the downfalls of the psychiatric marketing madness and the pharmaceutical madness of marketing is it has gotten into the streets, and the streets are causing, we don't even know the numbers of people who are dying from street drug use mixed with pharmaceuticals that are meant for mental illness or other mood disorders. The amount of Adderall that people stored around here is unbelievable. It's unbelievable. And it's really, really sad. These people want the drugs, though. That's what I don't understand.
Let me ask you this. It sounds like you've developed a lot of different methods and techniques that help you to kind of maintain your health on like an ongoing basis. When you have sort of an emergency or a crisis, or you're experiencing psychosis, that type of thing, what do you wish would be done for you in those times? How do you wish that your friends and family would respond? How do you wish, if you were forced and dragged into some sort of a psychiatric hospital, what would be a better way that you wish that this system treated you?
I wish there was compassion and understanding that the people of what they're going through in these states that they're in are generally terrified. If there's anger, and you see anger, below anger always lies fear. And in my experience, 17 times I was terrified to death. And what would have helped me the most would be one lady. She sat with me in one of my hospitalizations. She sat with me and held my hand and just sat there as a silent witness and let me cry. And that 12 minutes or 15 minutes she spent with me stands out far and above as the only person in my 17 episodes that really knew how to treat somebody. She must have had experience before, because all it really takes is somebody that's compassionate and quiet and gentle. Unfortunately, I haven't come across very many of those people in the psych field or in the hospitals, and even in my own daily life, because when you're in an episode, you're terrified, you're screaming. Everybody else tends to start to get animated, terrified, screaming, and trying to control the situation, and then things become very erratic, and that escalates everything. But if somebody were to come to me very quietly, calmly, and remain that way, and knew how to diffuse the situation calmly and with compassion, and that's the key that's missing, is the compassion element. Everything I'm seeing is coercion, is force, people holding you down and pulling your pants off you. Those types of things are complete opposite of compassion and gentleness. And my cats, they're the best helpers there is. They are the ones, they'll come in my lap, they'll be quiet, they'll calm you, they'll let your heart calm down. And that is what gave me strength to go through, was the year and a half I did of withdrawals, and horrible hallucinations for day after day when I was withdrawing from Depakote, and they put me on a antidepressant too. And it was my cats. And being quiet and having a nurturing environment, a safe environment, because there's paranoia often too. And, there's the hospital. My dream when I first had my first episode 20 years ago was to open up what I was going to call a Van Gogh hospital, and have a place where people can go where it was quiet, or where they could go and get their emotions out on a punching bag, or if they're angry, if they're sad, a weeping room, places where people are safe to express their emotions, because that's what this is. This is a crisis of emotion that needs to be expressed. It's been held in the body too long, and it explodes, and it needs to be cared for when it happens, or you're going to be even more traumatized. That's what happened to me. I was more traumatized after my trauma. It's like they're not doing it intentionally, but they've got to know that in the hospitals they're traumatizing people more than they're helping, in a way. I mean, it's a really sad system.
Yeah, there's some sad irony to the idea that trauma is creating the original issue, and then they're treating it with something that's traumatic, as if that's going to cure it. So let's talk a little bit about the group that you run, the Coalition to End Forced Psychiatric Drugging. So tell me a little bit about why you started this group, and how it began.
Well, I am on SSD. I don't work at this time. I can't really, for 2.5 years, I was recovering. I laid in bed for a whole year. And after the forced ATO happened, I was recovered enough to know that my anger had to go somewhere. I had to put this anger to rest. There was no way that I could live with it, and the art wasn't doing it anymore. I could not, I wasn't producing anything. I didn't want to do that anymore. I needed to do something that was going to make a difference with what had happened to me. I couldn't believe that my rights were violated, and I couldn't believe that they're still doing it. And I said, there's many, many Facebook pages out there, but I had to create something of my own, because I felt there wasn't enough science and there wasn't enough voices. And it was just, I wanted something organized that I could learn from, and that I could keep as something that I could refer back to when I needed to know about that study, about antidepressants, and the Cipriani papers, and who said this, and who are these people in the movement even. I didn't know about, I started by reading Thomas Saz, and then I found out about Robert Whitaker and Peter Bregan and Eleanor Longden. And I was like, there's tons of people, I need to know this. So I decided to start making memes. And my mom is a photographer, and I'm a photographer, sort of. So I just started taking my photography, since I own the copyright. I'm very, very big on copyrights, and making sure that sources are given the credit they're due. And I took all my pictures, and I just started to make memes with these people's words. And then I started attaching the scientific articles that I took, the blurb from for the meme. I wanted to put the science articles with the memes, so that people would have that, and they would know. In this day of fake news, we don't know where did this article come from? Who said that? Why would I even believe this? So I wanted to put it together in an easy format, and Facebook's perfect for that. On each meme that I'm making nowadays, I try to put the source, put the article, and then quote where these scientific articles come from. Where, I'm starting to dig into whether pharma is pharma behind this study? Is this what they're marketing now, and they want this study to pass? And I'm really getting into the details of learning what the actual science is. And it's fascinating how little there is. I'm like, I can't believe that so many people have bought into the marketing with so little science behind it. And that's what really got me. I will never work in the advertising field again, even if I get off of SSD and go back to work, which is my goal someday. I will never, ever want to be in advertising again because it's just blatant lying to sell people stuff that they don't need. And in the pharmaceutical industry, I worked for the newspaper. So I did a lot of ads in my life, and I learned a little bit about marketing about journalism. And I want the coalition page to be as honest, as scientific, and as it's very anti-psychiatry, but yet I want it to be factually based. I don't want people to be just saying you need to take your meds, because I can say, look, this study is going to take, this study says this says this, and these are the reasons why I don't take my medication that when I'm told to, because they're neurotoxins for one thing. They're not correcting a chemical imbalance for another thing. There's so much misleading information out there, and as a previous advertiser, wading through it, I know what side I'm on now. I'm on the anti-medication side, anti-psychiatry side, and I believe that there should be lawsuits for people who have been harmed like me, and there should be pro bono lawyers who are helping people to do this, because most of the time people are poor and they cannot afford to start a lawsuit. I've looked into it, and there were, just the negligence of my general practitioner alone, but you have to have money to do anything. And unfortunately, somebody who's on SSD is not going to be able to get justice. So this is my way of getting justice, and it's a way of transforming my anger in a positive manner. I don't believe in an eye for an eye. I believe I need to transform. It's my responsibility to take my anger against the system and proactively transform it into something positive that will help others who are struggling and who may be on an ATO and don't know where they're standing, where I was. Why is this happening? Is this even allowed? And getting answers. And then also uniting and coming together and saying, yes, we all agree this is not right. This has got to stop. And that's where the testimonial folder, I have 3 folders on Coalition. The first one is called Changing the Psychiatric Paradigm. And that is where I put science articles and any doctors that are speaking out, or basically the main gist of the site is in that folder. And then I also have an inspiration folder for just when you're feeling down and you want to be inspired. And I recently started a testimonials folder so that people could give a blurb and have a meme made. I could make a meme. I've made 40 memes or so out of people's words from the internet, from survivors. And it helps people to see that this is an atrocity. When they can read, this has happened to me, and people can't even believe it. They're like, I can't believe this is going on. And that is what has to be said.
So then in the mental health world or system, I never know the best expression to use. There's a lot of stigma around being, having a diagnosis or having gone through psychosis or hearing voices in extreme states. And so a lot of people don't want to identify with that themselves, especially not in a public setting. So like for me, like I found online groups, but not through Facebook. I found places on the internet that I could be anonymous and not have to kind of put myself out there. Yeah, in your group, you're on Facebook. And so there's people that self-identify and they're kind of open about it. So how are these people finding you, or how are you finding them, and what kind of conversations are you having? Are a lot of them being open about their experiences, or people generally quiet and just kind of lurking because they don't want to be exposed? What's that process been like?
It has been very interesting. I myself struggled for a couple of years about putting stuff out there for my friends and family to read. And after the ATO happened, I said, hell with it. I have to come out of the closet, as it were. Some people are saying coming out of the spiritual closet. And I speak of it as in terms of spirituality. To me, it was every episode I have is a spiritual emergency. It is not a bipolar episode. It's not even psychosis. I like to call it a spiritual emergency. So I've identified it as sort of my spiritual path that I'm on. And yeah, so Western mainstream has decided to label me as bipolar, but I don't agree with that. But I see that resistance. The stigma is extremely high. I've had a couple people contact me privately and say they don't want anybody to know, and I've counseled them just by, texting so that they're anonymous or whatever. They don't want to be out there. And that's great. That's fine, because I know what it was like to have the spotlight on me and to feel like everybody was questioning my behavior. And once you put that out there, every time you meet somebody, and especially in a small area, I live in the UP where there's not that many people, so people know each other. And I had to decide to overcome that stigma and say, I don't even care what people think of me anymore. It is too important for me to get the message out there that these atrocities are happening. I went to school originally at U of M, University of Michigan, for sociology, and now I'm a graphic designer. So I couldn't hack it. I knew I couldn't be a social worker and come home with those problems every night, but my heart and soul is still in the sociology field. And when I started to see these kids shooting each other at Columbine at 20, or, in the past 20 years, all these mass shootings that started happening, and I started to question, why is this happening? Why is this happening? Why is this happening? And I never got any real good answers until I was forcibly coerced in psychiatry, and until I went through the withdrawals from the medications that they had given me. I could understand the state of mind of some of these children who are taking guns to school. I could understand where they would get messed up in the system, because of the coercion of psychiatry can often lead somebody to feel like there is no way out. And if there's no way out, they might try to take themselves out. After you've been coerced, you don't see the hospital as a way to get help anymore. So what does that leave you? What options do you have if you're an 18-year-old kid on Adderall, or you've been given drugs? Or most of these kids have been given psychotropic drugs. Many of them have gone through withdrawals. Many of them have been switched to many other different kinds, being on polypharmacy. There's many that are taking several drugs. So when I came down to my sociological background and seeing the connections between psychotropic drugs, coercive psychiatry, and mass killings, and understanding the mindset behind them, I said, I can't not speak out anymore. I have to tell people of the horrible hallucinations I had. And for a month straight, I took a shower every day in the Nazi gas chamber. I thought I was being put to death. And that was trauma from my probably just years. Some people call it generational trauma, where we hold the trauma from our ancestors in our DNA, actually. And for my experience, that made sense, because I literally was like being in the Nazi concentration camps, gas shower, in my shower. I thought I was being gassed every day for at least a month. And that was just a small little pittance of my hallucinations that I went through during withdrawals. Imagine what these kids have gone through. They have gone through some sort of major hell to do the things that they have done. And I have nothing but sympathy and compassion for anybody who has been through the system and sees no way out and does no longer see the hospital as help. And there are no alternatives. So that is the ultimate with Coalition, is so that there are eventually will be, my hope is, places that people can go to, a Van Gogh hospital, whatever you call it, where there is love and compassion, gentleness offered to people instead of medications for long term. And if, there are places like that you can go to. I don't know if you've heard of, he's in Brazil, Shawn Blackwell.
Actually, I also interviewed Shawn for this project for this week.
So, that is wonderful. Yeah. I saw him 15 years ago.
And he gave a number of years.
Amazing hope that people are out there helping people, assist them go through this experience and come out with it much more positive. There are much better ways to deal with this situation. The people who are suffering right now, in 20 years, I hope that they will not continue to be going through what have gone through with an ATO and injections against your will. I mean, these things, they don't help. They make things worse, and they create no avenue, that, I don't know, no avenue for a child or a younger person, or even me at 40. I had nowhere to go, and I did not want to go. I'd rather go off the mountain than back to the hospital. And that's really sad. That's really scary when nobody, or when you don't have a way out. Now I have some things in place, and I did want to mention, I have an advanced mental health directive, and that is something that everyone should have done if they've ever been labeled with a mental illness, or any illness for that matter. You need to have that up at the hospitals around you in case you're brought in. I don't know if it's going to be effective. I did have a lawyer sign it. So my advanced directive calls for no medications if I were show up there in crisis again. As well, there's a lady on Facebook who runs Prescription Allergy Alert, a Cymbalta group, and her name is Mana Mason, and she also had a good recommendation that said to access your allergy alert with your hospital. If you do not wish to have psychotropic medications given to you, put that in your allergy alert. And then possibly if I go there in crisis, they'll have to refer to both the advanced directive, the allergy alert, and follow my wishes. I mean, that's all I'm asking, is for me to have the human right to have people follow my wishes when it comes down to intrusive neurotoxins put into my own body. And that's black and white as far as I know, and the UN agrees. And it's too bad the US is so far behind. And that's another thing we do at Coalition, as I promote the CRPD, and I want to see that treaty passed and ratified, and the optional protocol put in place. And part of me feels like I should go and be a lawyer at this point. I know you're doing a great job with the videoing, and I'm making memes, but I know that down the road, things will advance, and hopefully we can progress to a place where we can get laws passed, and I feel like I need to become a lawyer and looking at all this legal work out there and trying to understand the law codes. How can this happen? Well, look it up. Well, I guess I got to become a lawyer.
Yeah, it's interesting. I interviewed Al Galvez, who's one of the board members for Mind Freedom International, and actually it was when I met him. We had breakfast once, and I was asking him, what needs to be done to really change things and make a difference. And he's like, well, if we had a lot of money, we could really get things done. And I was like, that's what everybody says. What would you do with the money? And I actually thought, this is why it sticks with me. Whenever something is not what I expected, it always sticks. I thought it was going to be, we need money to get the word out and to raise awareness. That was what I thought he was going to say. And he said, no, he goes, we need to have lawyers. He's like, if we had a team of lawyers that were working, then we could be out there fighting these battles. And if we won enough of these, then laws would start getting changed. And to me, that was an eye-opening. I mean, I've actually considered the idea of like, should I go get a law degree? Is that where I'd be best utilized in this fight? I still think about it. I'm not sure. I'm trying to figure out where I fit in.
Yeah, where best to put your energies.
Yeah, I mean, right now it's doing this. So maybe I don't know if I have a skill at this or not. I mean, it's mostly me just asking people questions.
Well, that's actually, the more you ask, the more you learn, and that's where the law thing really stuck with me. My dad is a very big, he's big in the law. Not, he's a construction guy. He's just an average Joe, but he believes in rights. And my dad also had a breakdown when I was young, and that affected my growing up. And in a way, I feel like he taught me how to break down, because I was so young when he was, having his breakdown, and I learned, unfortunately. But either way, the law is the only place that we can make a difference in a larger manner. And I've been following Tina Minkowitz, who did most of the writing, or a lot of the writing for the CRPD, and she's in law, and also Jim Gottstein up in Alaska, James Gottstein. I used several of his words for memes, and I'm trying to tease out exactly, I contacted Gary Brown. He had a couple videos. He's a lawyer out in California. I contacted him and asked him. He said, basically, you have to learn Michigan's laws. You need to know because every state is different. So he couldn't really advise me because he's in California. But that's where I'm at right now in this process myself, is to figure out legally, do I have any footing to stand on? And I've never been to want to sue anybody. I definitely don't want to sue the small little local hospital here. But the more that I research, the more I understand that nothing will change unless the laws change. And that is where our attention needs to go. And I mean, the more we can learn on our own laws, that's great. But somebody has to lobby against the laws that exist, because things like Kendra's law, I think it's, I can't remember, Stevens law or something, but all these laws that were passed because of singular incidents, named after Kendra, unfortunately, we have to pass laws named after you or I, somebody who's been tortured, to stop these things from happening. And the beauty of the UN CRPD is that it's already been done and it's ratified by so many countries that are trying to implement. I'm watching over in Norway. They have ordered drug-free treatment option for the Norwegians because of over there, their anti-psychiatry groups got together and they said, finally, we're not going to, no more infighting among us groups. We're going to come together. And they lobbied and they demanded that there would be a drug-free treatment option. And they have beds now. They just started it. And they are following the UN CRPD. So that's where we, I think, need to put our attention, is on the laws and on the CRPD and getting the United States to ratify it, because the law is already in place. If the United States ratified the CRPD, then we have a legal leg to stand on to take to court by saying, look, you are violating these laws. These ATOs go against the law. But I don't really know what it takes to ratify a treaty from the UN. I have no idea. I got to talk to Tina Minkowitz, I guess.
Yeah, I missed that day of social studies myself. Let me ask you, you sort of mentioned this before, but the last thing I want to ask you, because you did mention things about advancce directives, but do you have any advice for other people that are out there that might be going through the same thing as you, that are dealing with involuntary treatment of some type, or even their family members? What kind of advice do you have for people that are out there?
Well, I say get some sleep for sure. Get rest as much as possible. And if you're dealing with it, being forced treatment, you're going to experience anger. That's where I got extremely angry when I started to understand that nobody was on my side. Everybody was against me. And in the heat of the moment, hopefully you have some anger skills in place. But that is where a lot of the explosion, the explosive emotions will come from, is this anger at being forced to do something against your will. If you can control yourself, it'll be much easier. If you can control yourself in the hospital, and you're in the hospital and you're being forced to be in the hospital, follow protocol. And the faster you follow protocol, the faster you'll get out of there. I don't want to tell people to do what I did. I mean, I do want to tell people to fight like I did in the hospital and refuse your medication, but that's going to lead to hell. So I don't really want to tell people that, because my fight against being medicated turned into a year-long fight of being forced medicated. So it's really hard to tell people to stand up and fight in the hospital, because you don't want to see anybody go through that. I, in a way, want to just tell people, lie. Something I never would want to tell people in my life, because I am the most honest person, and that's why I couldn't do it. I couldn't lie to them anymore. I said, I don't want these drugs. I don't want to be, I don't want them in my body, and I couldn't lie. And unfortunately, if you find yourself in a psychiatric hospital and a psychiatrist in front of you, you're going to want to lie. And that is the saddest state of affairs I can ever imagine, to have an honest person feel like they have to lie to get out of a situation that they find themselves in. And that's heartbreaking. That's teaching children, that's teaching everybody, just lie and say you're okay. So it is a really hard piece of advice to say, here's your options. If you don't take the meds and you don't follow orders in the hospital, you'll probably be coerced. So I would probably have to give the advice to not shake the boat, suck it up and say, I'll be out of here within a few days if I take the meds, and then start the fight. If you have the anger and you have the will to, don't fight in the hospital, give up, just call it a surrender zone. And then when you get out, try to change it, because there's no changing it in the hospital. And you're going to I was so full of anger, but that anger also is transformed now into my page. So that's a good thing if you can harness your anger. But I basically would say, be as calm as possible in the midst of your trauma and follow orders, because unfortunately at this time, we do not have a compassionate or gentle way of treating people. And I guess if I could go back and tell myself anything, I would say, just be quiet. Don't say anything for 2 weeks or however long they want to keep you, and just follow orders. And then fight the fight when you get out, because we need the people to say that this is wrong and take note. I don't know if that's a very good answer, but.
No, it is. It might not be the one that makes you feel comfortable saying it, right? I mean, unfortunately, that's the advice that I give people too, and it sucks to give that advice to people, to say, like, keep your mouth shut, take the pills, get out, and then
Yes.
fight. Because then, at least for me, I put up the fight and everything, but then you get out, and now you're doped up on meds, and you lose your will to fight.
That's the problem. That's what happened to me. And I mean, they put me on this Abilify, and I was super healthy before, because I had gone through the detox. I'd gone through a sugar reset diet. I was eating all organic food. I was a vegetarian. I drink only spring water that I haul from a local spring. I had cleaned out all the chemicals out of my house. Now I'm on this Abilify. I have no will to do anything. I'm eating crappy food again. I've gained 40 pounds. I don't have any energy. I sleep 10 to 12 hours a night. Whereas before I was healed, and now I'm sick again. Just how they expect it, I guess. But this is a medication that's supposed to help me, but I'm fat. I have no energy. I'm like, this is not helping me. This is killing me. So I'm very much looking forward to 6 months from now when I'm on 0 medications. And I hope we can keep in touch, and, you can tell me a little your story. Are you going to do your own interview?
I haven't. Yeah, I've thought about, like, do I interview myself? I'm not sure. I know it. Seeing how you asked, I have written a draft of my story that I wrote, and I submitted it to Mad in America, but I don't want to release it just yet. I wanted to be off of all my psych meds before I went out with my story, and be off them for a little while, because I didn't want to come out and share my story and then be in the process of going off medications and fuck up, and then I'm back in the hospital. Yeah. And they're like, oh, this is the guy who just told the story, now he's back in. He must so there's this pressure of oh, well, if you become this shining example of a successful story of going off your meds, then there's a lot of pressure to stay off them. Yes. Healthy
and to stay sane forever.
Yeah, and it's not. I don't know if that's realistic. So I'm open about the fact that I've had experiences. I do stand-up comedy where I tell stories about it, but I've never actually just done the straight-faced, 100% honest, not just the funny parts, but the whole. I've not done that.
This is the first time I've spoken to somebody about it other than my therapist and, my family and my friends. And I was very nervous. I was like, I don't even know. But then for me, it's just just be honest, just be honest, just be honest. This is a chance to be honest. Whereas in the hospital, you're not being honest. So It's a chance to be truly yourself, to be authentic. And that's my goal in life on my spiritual path, is to be authentic. And it entails all of it. You know, the ugliest parts where I was, I ran outside of my house naked one episode. My neighbors, you know, I mean, talk about embarrassing, these things. But I did also manage to break out of a psych ward at one point and run down the street in the middle of the night and
You got out.
tried to get cigarettes. I broke out. I slipped away and got out of the hospital. So that was fun. There's a lot of comical things that happened to me during these times. You know, you can't believe. And to me, it seems to me it's just, we don't have the proper education on how to deal with emotions. Not in my family anyway. And it's, I think, something that's to pass down in your family, how to process of a traumatic I mean, my grandma died and I don't remember anybody talking to me about it. She was my best friend. You know, I didn't process that. I was like 12, I was 8 years old. I mean, you know, I went to the funeral and I don't remember anybody ever grieving or talking about grief or saying, you know, it's okay to cry or anything, you know. So emotional processing, I think, is my big issue, and having the repression of that, and then having it explode when other things happen. That is the scariest thing. And anybody who's going through it or has gone through it, you know, I took the drugs for a good 7-8 years, and then I had 6 years free. And when I look at those 2 periods in my life, I can say black and white, the drug-free period was way better. And I don't know, a lot of people say the drugs help them. For me, it's like, no, they don't. They can't, they don't possibly help them. I'd rather live with psychosis, which only happens once every 3 years or 2 years. And it only happens for a week or 2 weeks at the most, you know, and then you go through a period of withdrawal or, you know, depression afterward if you've been coerced. But for years I took everything willingly, and I was a willing participant in the mental health system. And I didn't know that there was all of this coercion, and I didn't know that there was a problem. I thought that I had a disease. I thought that I had to take these meds. I thought it was scientifically shown. That's what people are starting to get surprised. They're like, what do you mean there's no such thing as a chemical imbalance? I'm like, there's no such thing. If anything, it's caused by drugs. And that's where you start to read this stuff and start to really question the advertising. As I was an advertiser, and I had to question. And once I looked, and that was really, I had an existential breakdown about what I was doing in my life. I was not helping the planet. I was not helping people. I was marketing crap to people for them to buy, and doing ads for strip clubs, and, you know, just shit that I didn't agree with. And that's all fine and dandy for those who want to do that. But my cognitive dissonance, and that's a word that I have found very powerful. I had such high cognitive dissonance in every area of my life. I was doing one thing and I was saying another thing. And I was creating conflict after conflict after conflict, finally to the breaking point where now I've gotten clear. And some people would say I found God. Well, I found there is no God. I mean, my experience, I was born and raised in that strict God-fearing church. Now I've become more of a Buddhist or somebody who doesn't believe in a one God. I believe in a higher beings of some sort. But, you know, I basically left Christianity, and it was all because of the spiritual awakening that I had, and questioning everything. Become down to questioning everything and seeing, well, if that's not true, then what else isn't true? And then I discovered how much of a lie I was living, how much of a lie most of America is living in the world. And then I had to forgive the world and say, well, we're just at this place where we're at, you know, we're still living in somewhat of the dark ages, in my opinion, where there's torture still happening. I mean, no, they don't strap me down every month and pull my arms and legs off my body, but injecting me against my will is torture. And, you know, that's really what it comes down to, is that we cannot continue to be torturing people in this day and age.
All right. Well, that's a sort of serious but appropriate note to wrap up on. Can you tell our audience if they want to follow up with you, how they can find your Facebook group and get in touch with you?
Yeah, I've been finding, I did want to answer that. You did ask that. People can find my page on Facebook, Coalition Against Forced Psychiatric Drugging, and or just I have a business name, Sisu Creative. You can Google Sisu Creative and see a bunch of memes that I made that are attached to my page. I do want to do a regular website someday, but basically I posted several memes onto many Facebook groups that were anti-psychiatry, and people just started following me. I think I have about 800 followers now, and I'm excited about growing even bigger and getting more and more people, and maybe having some organized events at some point in the future. Being a part of the protest APA 2018 is really exciting. I've been putting that on all my memes, and I hope that we can create awareness for everybody. And ever want to know more, just look at the page, and there's so many good helpful groups out there for coming off medications. Unfortunately, I don't have that kind of page where I can help people come off medications. I recommend doing that strictly with a psychiatrist. Following a strict tapering program if you're thinking of coming off. And also just, yeah, you can come on the page, and if you wanted to put a testimony on or write up a small testimony for a meme, I'm willing to make memes and put them in my testimonial folders. Hopefully we'll have thousands of people in there saying, you know, this happened to me, please stop this, and let's make this a better world for the kids.
Okay. Well, thanks for doing this interview, Jelly. I really appreciate your time.
Thank you so much for giving me a chance to speak.